There's a psychological experiment Carl Jung witnessed that he never forgot. A woman came to him, convinced everyone in her life disrespected her. Her colleagues dismissed her ideas. Her family ignored her boundaries. Even strangers seemed to treat her with contempt. Jung did something unexpected. He didn't ask about them. He asked, "What part of yourself are you disrespecting that you need them to validate?" The woman went silent. Because Jung had just revealed something she'd spent years avoiding. She was demanding from others what she refused to give herself. Here's what Jung understood that most people miss. Disrespect isn't just something that happens to you. It's a mirror showing you where you've abandoned yourself. And once you understand this, really understand it, everything changes. Today we're exploring 5 insights from Jung that don't just help you handle disrespect. They reveal why certain people's opinions have been destroying you and how to become psychologically untouchable. This isn't about setting boundaries or confrontation tactics. This is about a shift so fundamental that disrespect stops landing, because you're no longer asking others to give you what only you can provide. By the end of this, you'll see every dismissal, every interruption, every moment of disrespect completely differently. And that new vision will set you free. Let me tell you about Marcus, a talented software developer who joined a new team. From day one, his manager, Richard, dismissed every suggestion Marcus made. In meetings, Richard would cut him off, assign credit for Marcus's ideas to others, and publicly question his competence. Despite Marcus's proven track record, Marcus's first instinct was to work harder, to prove himself. He stayed late, produced flawless work, volunteered for extra projects. But nothing changed. Richard's disrespect remained constant, almost automatic. Here's what Jung discovered. When someone consistently disrespects you, especially when that disrespect seems disproportionate to reality, you're often witnessing what he called projection. Jung wrote that we all carry a shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, the qualities we've deemed unacceptable, the failures we can't face, the potential we're terrified we lack. And when we can't look at these aspects in ourselves, we project them outward. We see them in other people instead. Richard, it turned out, had taken his position after the company passed him over for a more technical role, the exact role Marcus now excelled in. Every time Richard looked at Marcus, he saw a mirror of his own unlived potential, his own technical inadequacy that he'd never faced. The disrespect wasn't really about Marcus at all. It was Richard's shadow cast onto a convenient screen. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But here's the twist. This works both ways. When you understand that someone's disrespect often has nothing to do with you, something shifts. Not in a dismissive, that's their problem way, but in a deeper recognition. Their behavior is revealing their internal landscape, not your worth. Marcus stopped trying to prove himself to Richard, not out of defeat, but out of understanding. He continued his excellent work, but he stopped seeking Richard's validation because he recognized it was never actually available. Richard was fighting a battle with his own shadow, and Marcus was just caught in the crossfire. The shift. When you recognize projection, you stop taking disrespect personally. You see it for what it is, someone else's unresolved inner conflict, playing out on the stage of your interaction. This doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment. It means you respond from a place of clarity rather than wounded ego. Now here's where Jung's wisdom gets uncomfortable, because projection isn't just something other people do. We all do it. Sarah worked with a colleague, Tom, who constantly interrupted her. Every meeting, every conversation, he'd talk over her, finish her sentences, redirect discussions she'd started. It infuriated her. She saw him as arrogant, domineering, disrespectful. Then Sarah started therapy, and her therapist asked an unexpected question. "What does Tom do that you wish you could do?" Sarah's immediate response was defensive. She wasn't like Tom. She respected people. She listened. But as she sat with the question, something uncomfortable emerged. The truth was, Sarah had spent her entire life making herself small. Raised by a narcissistic mother who punished any form of self-assertion, Sarah had learned that taking up space was dangerous. She'd become the perfect listener, the accommodating colleague, the person who always yielded the floor. And every time Tom interrupted her, she wasn't just angry at his disrespect. She was angry at her own inability to claim space. She was angry at the assertiveness she'd buried in her shadow. Tom represented everything she'd denied in herself: boldness, self-prioritization, the willingness to be heard even if others didn't like it. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Sarah's work wasn't to make Tom respect her. Her work was to integrate what Tom represented, not his disrespectful behavior, but the legitimate assertiveness she'd been terrified to claim. She started small. She practiced finishing her own sentences, even when interrupted. She began claiming credit for her ideas in meetings. She learned to say, "I wasn't finished," when someone talked over her. Not aggressively, but firmly. And something interesting happened. Tom's behavior didn't magically change, but Sarah's experience of it did. She was no longer wounded by every interruption, because she'd reclaimed the part of herself that refused to be silenced. The disrespect still happened, but it no longer had the same power over her. The shift. Often we're most wounded by disrespect that touches our own shadow, the qualities we've rejected in ourselves. When you integrate these aspects, the disrespect loses its sting. You become whole enough that others' lack of respect can't destabilize you. David was the youngest partner at his law firm, and he wore it like armor. Every slight, every moment of disrespect from older partners felt like a threat to his legitimacy. He'd fought so hard to get there, he couldn't let anyone suggest he didn't belong. So David fought back against every dismissal. He worked 80-hour weeks. He one-upped colleagues in meetings. He collected wins like evidence in a trial, trying to prove his worth to everyone around him. The exhaustion was crushing, and despite all his proving, the disrespect continued. Jung's concept of individuation offers a different path. Individuation is the process of becoming who you actually are, rather than who others expect you to be, or who you think you need to be to earn respect. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For David, this meant asking a question he'd never considered. Why did he need their respect so badly? As he explored this in analysis, he uncovered a painful truth. His father had been a successful attorney who died when David was young. David had spent his entire life trying to earn a respect he could never receive, his father's. Every older partner was a stand-in, every dismissal a replay of his deepest wound. He was living his father's unlived life, not his own. Individuation meant separating his worth from external validation. It meant asking not, "How do I make them respect me?" but "What do I actually want to create with my life?" It meant recognizing that no amount of external respect would ever fill the internal void. David didn't quit the firm, but he stopped fighting for recognition. He started choosing cases that genuinely interested him, even if they weren't the most prestigious. He set boundaries around his time. He began developing relationships with partners based on mutual interest rather than strategic positioning. And paradoxically, the respect came, not from everyone, but from the people whose respect was actually worth having. Because he'd stopped seeking validation and started living authentically, he naturally attracted those who valued authenticity. The shift. When you build your sense of self from the inside out, through individuation, you stop being devastated by others' lack of respect. You're no longer trying to extract from them what only you can give yourself, acceptance of who you actually are. Jung distinguished between the persona, the social mask we wear, and the self, our true nature. And here's the trap. Sometimes we're so invested in our persona being respected that we miss when that respect would actually harm our growth. Elena was known as the reliable one at her non-profit organization. She was the person who said yes to everything, who stayed late, who made everyone else's problems her own. Her colleagues respected this persona immensely. They valued her sacrifice, her availability, her selflessness. But Eleanor was dying inside. She'd built a persona of the perfect helper, and now she was trapped in it. Any attempt to set boundaries felt like betrayal. Any prioritization of her own needs felt selfish. She was being respected for a version of herself that was slowly destroying her. Jung warned about this. The persona is a complicated system of relations between the individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough a kind of mask. But the danger is that people become identical with their personas. The disrespect Elena actually needed to handle wasn't from others, it was from herself. She was disrespecting her own needs, her own limits, her own authentic desires, and she was doing it to maintain a persona that others respected. When she finally started saying no, when she began setting boundaries, the respect she'd been receiving evaporated. Colleagues who'd praised her reliability now called her difficult. Her manager, who'd valued her availability, now questioned her commitment. This is the test Jung knew we'd face. Are you willing to lose respect for a false self in order to claim respect for your true self? Eleanor pushed through. She reclaimed her evenings. She stopped absorbing others' emotional chaos. She became, in her words, less respected and more real. But then, something shifted. As she became more authentic, she attracted a different kind of respect. Not the respect for her sacrifice, but respect for her boundaries. Not admiration for her selflessness, but genuine appreciation for what she chose to give, when she chose to give it. The shift. Sometimes what feels like disrespect is actually reality refusing to validate a false version of you. The question isn't always, how do I make them respect me? But am I demanding respect for a persona that's killing my true self? Here's Jung's most profound insight about handling disrespect. The goal isn't to eliminate it, it's to use it as a catalyst for psychological transformation. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold opposing tensions until a third way emerges, not fight or flight, not dominance or submission, something entirely new. Michael experienced relentless disrespect from his father, even as an adult. Every achievement was minimized. Every life choice was questioned. Every conversation felt like a subtle assault on Michael's worth. Michael had tried everything. He'd tried proving himself, more degrees, better jobs, bigger accomplishments. Nothing was ever enough. He'd tried confrontation, setting boundaries, limiting contact. The disrespect adapted, but never stopped. Then Michael's therapist introduced him to Jung's transcendent function. The idea wasn't to resolve the tension by choosing sides, either accepting his father's disrespect or cutting him off completely. It was to hold both realities simultaneously, his father's limitations and his own worth, the pain of wanting respect and the freedom of not needing it from this particular person. Jung wrote, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate." For Michael, this meant sitting with an excruciating paradox. He could love his father and recognize his father would never give him what he needed. He could want his father's respect and know he'd never receive it. He could maintain a relationship and stop expecting it to feed his sense of worth. Holding these opposites didn't eliminate the pain, but it transformed his relationship to the pain. Michael stopped going into conversations with his father hoping for something different. He stopped the internal collapse when the disrespect came. He could hear his father's criticism and think, that's his limitation, without it becoming an indictment of Michael's worth. The transcendent function isn't about resolution, it's about transformation. It's about becoming large enough to hold contradiction, complex enough to see clearly without being crushed by what you see. The shift. Disrespect becomes not a problem to solve, but a tension to transform you. When you embrace the transcendent function, you stop asking, how do I make this stop? And start asking, who am I becoming through this experience? There's something Jung understood that takes years for most people to grasp. The people who disrespect you most consistently are often your greatest teachers, not because their behavior is acceptable, but because they're revealing patterns you've been unconsciously perpetuating. Let me tell you about Jennifer, a therapist who prided herself on her empathy and psychological insight. She had a sister, Monica, who dismissed and belittled her for decades. Every family gathering, every phone call, Monica found ways to minimize Jennifer's accomplishments, mock her choices, and treat her with barely concealed contempt. Jennifer had analyzed this dynamic endlessly. She understood Monica's insecurity. She could trace Monica's behavior back to their childhood, to their mother's favoritism, to Monica's own failed relationships. Jennifer had every psychological explanation for why Monica disrespected her, but the disrespect continued, and Jennifer remained trapped in it. Here's what Jung knew that Jennifer was missing. Understanding someone's psychology doesn't free you from the dynamic. Sometimes our very understanding becomes another way of staying stuck. Jung wrote about what he called psychological compensation, the idea that the psyche always seeks balance. And Jennifer's role in the dynamic was this. She kept showing up, kept engaging, kept offering herself to someone who consistently rejected her. Why? Because deep down, Jennifer was still trying to heal a childhood wound. Her mother had been emotionally unavailable, and Jennifer had spent her life trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. Monica wasn't just her sister. She was a stand-in for every unavailable person Jennifer had ever needed. The disrespect Jennifer experienced from Monica was painful, but what Jung would point to was Jennifer's unconscious choice to keep returning to it. The question wasn't just, why does Monica disrespect me? It was, why do I keep offering myself to someone who shows me, repeatedly, who they are? This is where Jung's wisdom cuts deep. He believed that we don't just randomly encounter disrespect. We often unconsciously seek out situations that replay our deepest wounds, because the psyche is always trying to resolve what's unfinished. Jennifer's breakthrough came when she stopped focusing on Monica's disrespect and started examining her own pattern. She wasn't just a victim of her sister's cruelty, she was an active participant in a dance she'd been doing her whole life. She began to notice she felt most compelled to reach out to Monica when she was feeling vulnerable. She defended Monica to other family members who suggested limiting contact. She made excuses for behavior she'd never tolerate from a friend. She was, in Jung's terms, in the grip of a complex, an unconscious emotional pattern driving her behavior. The shift came when Jennifer asked herself, what would it mean to truly let go of trying to earn respect from someone who cannot give it? The answer terrified her, because it meant grieving. It meant accepting that she would never have the sister she wanted. It meant releasing the fantasy that if she just found the right words, the right approach, Monica would finally see her value. Jung understood that this kind of acceptance is a death, not a physical death, but the death of a hope, a story, an identity. Jennifer had been the sister trying to repair the relationship for so long that letting go of that role felt like losing herself. But on the other side of that death was birth. When Jennifer stopped seeking Monica's respect, she stopped organizing her self-worth around her sister's inability to provide it. She could attend family events without the emotional charge. She could hear Monica's dismissals without the internal collapse. She didn't cut Monica off. That would have been just another form of emotional entanglement. She simply stopped expecting something different. And in that acceptance, she found a strange kind of peace. The deeper truth, Jung knew that the people who disrespect us are often mirrors, showing us where we're still seeking external validation for what can only be given internally. The question isn't just how to handle their disrespect, it's why we're still standing in front of that particular mirror. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious adds another layer to understanding disrespect. Sometimes the disrespect you face isn't just personal, it's archetypal, rooted in patterns older than any individual relationship. Consider James, a black executive in a predominantly white corporation. The disrespect he faced was often subtle, the way his ideas were met with skepticism until a white colleague echoed them, the way he had to prove his competence repeatedly while others were given the benefit of the doubt, the way he was perceived as aggressive for behaviors that were seen as assertive in his white peers. James could see the individual projections at play, the insecure colleague, the threatened manager, the unconsciously biased leadership. But Jung's framework helped him understand something deeper. He was facing not just individual shadows, but collective ones. The collective unconscious, Jung proposed, contains archetypes, universal patterns and images that shape human experience across cultures and generations, and some of these archetypes carry cultural shadows, prejudices, fears, and projections that entire societies haven't integrated. James wasn't just dealing with individual people who disrespected him. He was encountering the collective shadow of a culture that had devalued people who looked like him for centuries. This wasn't his wound to heal alone. It was a cultural wound, expressing itself through individual interactions. Jung wrote, "The collective unconscious contains the whole spiritual heritage of mankind's evolution, born anew in the brain structure of every individual." For James, understanding this was both liberating and sobering. Liberating because it confirmed what he'd always known, that the disrespect he faced wasn't a reflection of his worth, but of unconscious cultural patterns. Sobering because it meant that no amount of personal achievement would fully shield him from these dynamics. But here's where Jung's wisdom becomes powerful. Even when facing collective patterns, individuation is still possible. James couldn't change the collective unconscious, but he could choose how he related to it. He stopped internalizing the disrespect as evidence of his inadequacy. He built community with others who understood the dynamics he faced. He chose battles strategically, speaking up when it mattered, conserving energy when it didn't. He found mentors who could see him clearly, unclouded by cultural projections. Most importantly, he worked to ensure the collective shadow didn't take root in his own psyche. He refused to accept the limitations others projected onto him. He stayed connected to his own sense of worth, even when the culture around him failed to reflect it back. Jung believed that individuals who do their psychological work contribute to the evolution of the collective unconscious itself. Every person who integrates their shadow, who individuates, who refuses to pass on unconscious patterns, they shift something in the collective psyche. James's work wasn't just personal healing, it was cultural healing, enacted one conscious choice at a time. The expansion. When you face disrespect rooted in collective patterns, whether based on race, gender, class, or other identities, Jung's framework reminds you that you're not fighting a personal battle alone. You're encountering shadows older than you. Your work is to not let those shadows define you, while also acknowledging the reality of what you face. Jung spent his life exploring the depths of the human psyche, and one thing he understood better than almost anyone: we don't grow by avoiding difficulty. We grow by facing it with consciousness. Disrespect hurts. It should hurt. It's a violation of human dignity. But Jung knew that our response to disrespect reveals everything about our relationship with ourselves. When someone disrespects you, you're standing at a crossroads. You can react from your wounds, trying desperately to extract validation from people who may never give it. Or you can use that moment, as Jung did, as an invitation to deeper self-knowledge. Ask yourself, what is this disrespect showing me about my shadow? What am I still trying to prove, and to whom? Which parts of myself am I respecting, and which am I betraying? What persona am I defending that might need to die? These aren't comfortable questions. Jung never promised comfort. He promised wholeness. The people who disrespect you will probably continue to do so. That's their journey, their shadow, their unlived life playing out. Your journey is different. It's about becoming so grounded in your own worth that their lack of respect becomes irrelevant. Not because you've built walls, but because you've built a self that doesn't require their validation to exist. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's what he also knew: it's the most liberating thing too. When you accept yourself completely, shadow and light, strength and limitation, wound and wisdom, you become unreachable by disrespect. Not because you don't feel it, but because you're no longer asking others to give you what only you can provide, complete acceptance of who you are. That's not just handling disrespect, that's psychological freedom. And that's the gift Jung offers us. not strategies to change others, but transformation deep enough that others' opinions can no longer destabilize the self you've built from the inside out.